Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to be talking about doing bias binding on your bag instead of trying to do a drop-in lining or trying to flip the bag out through a tiny hole, otherwise known as berthing, which for those of you in the room who have done that know is terribly accurate. I do have a bag here that is ready to go. Admittedly, it's been ready to go for a couple of weeks now, but I'm lazy. And I've been meaning to do this video for the longest time. I'm getting there. Life is rough. So this is a perfect pouch, and it's made with like this really cute Sailor Moon vinyl that hopefully I can show you at the end of the video once we flip it right side out. The pattern is new. It's by me. I will have a video on it at some point, but for now I decided to go ahead and launch it because so many of the instructions kind of match my other patterns that I didn't think it was entirely necessary to launch it with a video in place. However, just so you're aware, this is out and available now, and I'll put the link in the comments, whatever, the description below. So this bag, because it's kind of like a little hip bag, needs to have really taunt lining, and one way to do that, and also to do like a zippered gusset with top stitching and everything, you kind of need to go with bias binding. And I know that people have been a little leery to do bias binding in the past. They'll do anything and everything to get away from drop-in linings and bias binding so they can birth through a tiny hole. But what that does sometimes, especially with zippered bags like this, is it can warp your zipper, you can break your zipper, or you end up with a really saggy bag lining because it's not really tacked down anywhere. So yeah, I mean, sometimes bags call for this kind of technique, and I think it's good to have some lessons in how to do it. So let's go ahead and hop right in. Okay, we're gonna look right here. I've got two products. Don't mind this. This is actually what I'm going to be using for the bag. And if you want to see the bag a little closer, also props for the new GoPro that I'm using here for the top-down view. Basically, I just have the lining and the exterior fabrics sewn directly together, and their raw edges are what's showing here that we're going to need to bias bind. I've already trimmed them down. I tend to do that. I trim them down to about 1/4 of an inch, and just mostly so it gets everything nice and even. You don't have to worry about some sides being longer than others or bulkier than others, etc. So it kind of helps even everything out before you go and sew. So there's a couple different things you can do. You can get traditional bias tape. You can make this yourself. This is just out of a nice cotton fabric, quilting weight. This is double fold bias tape. That is considered, they say extra wide, but basically what you need to make sure of is that the section here is 1/2 inch. That gives you plenty of wiggle room. Trust me, if you try to go smaller, it won't work. It really won't, because especially if you're going to do something like I've done here with vinyl, it's just too thick, and it really doesn't leave you with a lot of room. So if you get 1/2 inch bias tape, that works best. And again, you want it to be double fold. If you get single fold, then this isn't actually folded down. You have to fold it a second time, and then you're left with 1/4 inch. So that's not going to work for you for what you need to do here, because the whole point is to cover all of the raw edges. So that's why you want to get this. Or what I actually love to use is fold over elastic. And this I just, can pick up at my local crafting store. It's 1 inch fold over elastic. And again, it's really nice because you don't have to worry about finishing the edges. I'm just going to clip this right here just to even it up there. But this isn't going to fall apart. It's really nice and adds additional structure to a bag like this. It really does. It has stretch to it, it has give, but also it's got a natural fold on the inside, so it stays folded very easily, as opposed to this sometimes, unless you use like a bias tape maker or you buy it pre-made like this, it's gonna kind of be a pain to use. Now I'm not going to use this black elastic here because I feel it's too contrasty to the bag, so I'm actually going to use this white fold over elastic, but it's the exact same brand. It's still Dritz. You can get 1-inch fold over elastic at other locations and by other brands in bulk. You don't have to buy this, but this is usually plenty for what I need, as is this. These two brands are very popular and easy to get in a local craft store. Now, I need to take a breath because I forgot oxygen, and that was a lot of text. But one other thing that I have seen people do is use waterproof canvas. So they'll cut themselves a 1-inch strip of waterproof canvas, fold it in half, and use that. I can't speak to that method. I have never done it before. It might be something that you might want to look into as an option, because then at least your binding will match. For a bag like this that's going to be 3 inches deep, this section here is going to be so far back in the bag, nobody's going to see or notice if it's a slightly different color. So that's why, like, for me at least, I don't really care that much. I just want it to look decent, which is why I didn't go with these contrasty colors. I went with something that's a little more on the lighter side. The same, you know, with the tones and everything, it'll match up nicely and it won't look bad. Also, I have really cute thread, a variegated thread, so we're going to be using that. And the zipper's white, so it's everything's fine. It's fine. It doesn't have to be perfect, Felicia. So, before we go to the sewing machine view, and before I actually show you how to do the thing, with a bag like this, it's easiest to take the side that's going to lay flat and put that down. So let's say we're going to start here, and I always start at the center at the bottom. And I do not suggest pre-clipping all the way around. And you'll see why, because as you move around the machine, those clips, pens, staples, whatever you want to use to hold this in place is going to shift and pop and move and go all over the place, and then this will move around. I actually prefer to only clip a little bit of the very beginning down, and I'll explain why my clip is upside down for you OCD people in a minute, and work my way around and just hold it. And basically just make sure that I am not like folding, creasing, or doing anything weird with the seam allowance. And I work my way around. So actually, now that I think about it, because I'm going to be flipping it, which again, I should probably go over. So it's easiest to sew with the flat side down. You're going to have a much easier time if you do that. And you can even see, like, even for me, I have some pinches in this, and that's okay. This was, for anybody who followed the pattern woes, this was before I was like, oh crap, I put the wrong pattern size in for that gusset, which is fixed now, by the way. So go ahead and clip the very beginning, and this exact same thing, like what that I'm doing here, I would do with this fold over elastic as I would with bias tape or anything else. And that's because I would much rather sew evenly, tugging evenly as I do it, as opposed to like pre-placing it and then it starts to wrinkle up and it grabs it at a different rate at the bottom and you miss the stitch. The other thing is I do not stitch further in. I only want to attach this to the seam allowance. I don't care if that stitch shows, because that is my construction stitch. So as I go around and I sew this down, I'm going to be stitching with the distinct purpose of only catching the seam allowance and not hiding that thread. So let's go ahead and head to the sewing machine and I can show you how this works. I'm going to try very hard not to actually slow down or clip things, so feel free to like speed up the video while I'm doing the sewing if you kind of get the idea of it, or skip forward to the very end where I show you what it looks like. Ta-da! Okay, so here we are at the sewing machine. I've got my big old wad of elastic. I don't know why this isn't on a cardboard. I think at some point I unraveled it and was like, forget it, I'm not putting it back on. So I just shoved this off to the side, like right here. Now this is my industrial, clearly. I am running on cheat mode for the video, but honestly, it's just because I have everything set up to video from here because of the stream and everything. So don't feel intimidated. You do not need a fancy pants industrial machine to do the things that I'm doing here. Again, I've got it so that the flat side is going to be facing down, and then you got your gusset up like this. It'll just be a little easier. Don't be afraid to squeeze your bag. Remember, I've told you in the past, don't be afraid of squishing. It's not going to hurt the bag, really. I mean, if it does, maybe you need to consider fabric choices or life choices or whatever choices come to mind. You know, if you're like me and question things on the daily. So I'm going to go ahead and start just to get that locked in. And whenever you're going to manipulate this or the bag, always make sure your needle is down. Some machines do things automatically. Again, since I'm using my fancy pants industrial machine, that's not going to happen here. I'm going to gently take this away, this being the clip, and move that off to the side. And what I do is I just gently stretch and put my finger down along the edge like that and hold it and move like maybe an inch or two at a time. And I just work my way around. This is going to be the part of the video where if you're like, oh, I get it, you can move on and fast forward. But sometimes I hate skipping steps, and I hate when people fast forward themselves, automatically assuming that the viewer understands what's going on. And you can see, like, I'm also manipulating the foot, the presser foot, to bring it up as I wiggle around. And there's the fancy little, I'm gonna hide Miss Luna in there, a little cute zipper pull from Alchemats. And then I'm gonna keep going up, moving that way. And see this again, like with the fold over elastic, it's a little thicker, but it does provide additional structure. And the other thing that I like to get out of it is it's really easy to see where that line is, where it's like it's built into the elastic, so you don't have to worry about like where the line is that you need to aim for along the edge. So as I'm pulling it around and I'm just like putting my finger on there and I'm kind of feeling around, I did overcut on this portion here, so I am gonna violate that kind of rule and go in a bit, but that's because I'm an idiot and I got a little overzealous. Here we are on a straightaway, so of course I go a little further on those. It's really only on the curves that you have to worry. So like right here on that gusset curve. Also, you can thank me later or in the comments below that I actually used lighter colors with a contrasting thread this time so you can see what it is that I'm doing. If you get into any trouble spots, you can also just go ahead and clip it down too. That really helps as well. There's nothing that says in the rule book of sewing handbags that you cannot leverage your tools at any point. Just because some stupid YouTuber decided this is the way doesn't mean it has to be your way, which is why it's so nice to get so many of us on YouTube showing different ways of doing things. Okay, further. Like that. Also, I'll sing praises for fold over elastic like all week. You know, the thing I will say about like the waterproof version of the bias tape is I feel like it just wouldn't have any give. I have so many problems with like pinching and puckering that I would just worry it wouldn't lay flat or look good. But I mean, to each their own, because like waterproof canvas I don't know where that came from. Canvas doesn't really have like a bias to it, so it makes it a little difficult to accomplish that. And continuing along, moving right along into our last little curve. And you see, even I'm super careful. I've been doing this over 20 years, and even I'm like, nope, got to take it a little bit at a time. Okay, so we're coming up to the very end. Now, if you are using cotton for your bias binding. You're totally fine. You can fold, you can cut. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to saw away at this because I'm an idiot and I didn't bring the other scissors over. I am only going to take this little bit here. Actually, let me get my scissors. I'm just going to get my scissors and cut this correctly. Don't be like me. Leave your scissors on the other side of the room. I'm going to cut that end just like that. Get it nice and clean. And I just clip it down a bit just to hold it while I'm moving up this way. If you're using cotton bias tape, you can either fold it under on that end when you're overlapping, because see, I'm overlapping the starting point. Let me put that back. So I'm overlapping my starting point, and if you want, you can fold that under, or a perfectly acceptable alternative for this section here is to just use fray check. Just use a little fray check on it or fabric glue, let it dry, and it won't fall apart. It really won't. It's also at the very bottom. This is why I put it at the very bottom of the bag. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stitch all the way to the end, taking off my clip and holding everything with my finger. Careful not to sew through my finger. I've done that. It hurts. Do not advise. Okay, and then we're going to clip that. And even I make mistakes, so I tend to go back through and make sure on the other side that I caught everything. And not everything is evenly sewn, and that's okay. The point is to cover the raw edges. So I would like to say mission freaking accomplished there. So as long as it's sewn in and not you didn't miss, because I've done that before too, where I've missed the seam allowance and I've just sewn the elastic, then you're totally fine. So let's go back to the table and see what this looks like. Biome! I just wanted to do that. I have no idea if it shook the camera or not, so we'll just let it stay. So here's the finished side and here's the unfinished side. And it's looking pretty darn good. I love this little bag and I really want to flip it right side out and show you, but I also have to go through the other side. And the good thing is, like, this content, I can reuse it for when I do the video for this bag. But say you have a portion of the bag that is a little thicker. So in particular on the perfect pouch in the back, I actually have the tape in here. Sorry, I have like seatbelt webbing. And that seatbelt webbing has to get covered up as well. You don't want this to happen. So when working over those bulky areas, I go slower. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do this side of it as well, just so you can see this portion right here, where I go over it with the bias binding. And just take it slowly, especially here. Like if you're using a domestic machine, you're not going to be using this kind of webbing or this level of thickness. And actually, one of the things I would strongly suggest to people who want to do this on a domestic machine is to just rivet these darn things in on the back. Quite literally, just rivet them down like you would do with the convention raider, like we did there on the top edges. But again, those are things that I will discuss with that particular pattern. So let's go over the bias binding once again, and that will solidify the lessons learned, and we can flip it right side out and you can see the baby. Here's the baby. Okay, so I don't know, I've got a lot of extra energy to burn. I'm gonna snip a little bit of these threads. I noticed they're there. It's like I didn't fully clean this up, and now I see how lazy I am in real life. So there we go. Well, now you know too. All right, so we're gonna take this absolute hot mess of bundled fold over elastic and put the elastic right there in the middle and just clip it in place temporarily so we can get everything kind of started on the machine. I am using a top stitching length for this only because I have so much bulk in mine. So that's something that I would definitely advise as far as like what stitch length you should look at doing for this. And we're squeezing. See, we squeeze. Welcome to the squish. Squishberg. Okay. All right, now I also have been following Lady Craft's little trick to stapling down, which I wish I could do a video on. That is not my content, and I hope that she does a video on that coming soon. That will kind of go over how she has been attaching these together to do like that initial construction stitch that we're now covering up. And sometimes I don't time it well. Now we're gonna go around more. And what is my mantra? If people are looking at the inside of the bag and see uneven stitching or whatever in the lining, then pockets aside, then you did something else wrong. So don't worry if this looks a little uneven or zigzaggery or whatever. It's totally fine. All right, right here is where we're going to start being careful. So I'm going to stitch up to it. And we've got that extra bulk, but thankfully, and again, with this elastic, it's got a little give going this way as well. It's not exactly 4-way, but it's enough that I don't feel frightened of if I'm going to be covering up those raw edges or not. It's when you come down from the bulk, you want to go slowly. You don't want to rush. You may even want to hand crank so you don't stitch through your finger, because once again, ask me how I know. Because I have stories that I could tell you, but it might be a toss violation on YouTube. So going around. I timed it well that time. I think we should really just start taking a bet on my timing skills in the YouTube channel. Also, for anybody who's caught me sewing these live on Twitch, thank you for coming by. I really appreciate that. It's really fun. It's really fun when y'all find my streams, even if I'm not sewing and I'm playing a video game or something. It's really nice. I really appreciate that. It's like I'm making new friends. Okay, so we're coming around an area. Now I got some upper lip sweat. Y'all know what that means. I'm freaking out. We're gonna come around this little corner here. And now I'm squishing a lot, because now here's the next piece of that bias tape. I mean, not the bias tape, the seatbelt webbing. Yeah, there we go. Technical term. I'm gonna hold it down, go straight down like that. I can afford to go a little faster with this machine. Again, if you're on a domestic, please take your time. Don't fuss. Don't get sweaty upper lip. I just love I have to say that out loud. I have a sweaty upper lip. Should have seen me making this one live when I realized this is the bag that I was making when I realized the gusset was the wrong size. Isn't that great? That was the best. That was the best day ever. I about had a panic attack live on Twitch. And one more little corner. Put that down. Okay, I'm gonna measure now. We're close enough to the other end. I'm gonna measure and just flat with a little bit of an overlap, because as we come up and I'm stretching it a bit, it's gonna go over it even more, so you don't need to go too far. So before I get too far, now I'm going to place my clip to hold the end like that, just so it's nice and even, and stitch all the way up. Hold it with my fingers and stitch and back stitch and up. And that, ladies and gentlemen and non-binary folk, is that. So that's how you do the thing. Ha-ha! Shazam! Please don't sue me. Okay, we've got both sides completely covered. You can see it's like, it's not even the most even stitching or anything, but again, it's totally fine. You'll see why. I'm gonna go ahead and start flipping this inside out. Now, actually, as a lesson on birthing, which this is kind of birthing, only you have a much bigger hole to work with, go figure. I usually push from the thumbs to from the back side and work it up. And now, excuse the the vinyl rubbing ASMR. If you're not a fan of that noise, it really is the literal worst. It's almost as bad as taking nails to a chalkboard. But you can just push it out this way. And then, you know, pop open your little holes, all that, push out all the corners, all the things. There we go. Perfection. Now this one was, again, one of the ones where the bottom gusset was the wrong size, so it looks a little loosey-goosey, but that's all right. We have fixed that. We as in me, because I am not the royal we. And then I just take, again, with the bias binding, like it kind of just naturally follows the curve of the back of it. But if you look down in the bag, look at how nice and flush that is. You know, you don't have all this bagginess on the inside. And while there are ways to kind of get around having a baggy interior, which, you know, I have another video on, this is a lot nicer, you know, for a bag that's got like this squared shape or a very deep bag. You want to consider taking this kind of approach. If you don't want to do it this way, that's fine, but you might want to go in with a hand needle and kind of tack down the lining through holes in here, like in the stitching, just like in the corners, just to keep it down. But that is the finished bag. This again is a perfect pouch. You can do this with backpacks. There's some wonderful mini backpack patterns out there. There are even other people who have the style of bag pattern that you could apply this to if they don't call for it in their pattern. And that's one way to avoid ye old birthing holes. There you have it. It's really not that hard, see? I mean, I got a little sweaty there at the end, but we're fine. It came out, nothing fell apart, and my house is still intact. I just leave these moments in here so you guys get a glimpse of my personality, which is fleeting and flawed. But anywho, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I am regularly perusing comments that are made to the videos, regardless of how old they are. I also would love to take suggestions for future videos. Yes, including doing a perfect pouch video. Yes, I will do a Mighty Messenger video at some point. I just have deep regrets about the number of pieces I put on the Mighty Messenger pattern. Deep regrets. Sorry. I love you all. Please come by the Twitch channel whenever you get a chance. And I'll see you next time.